A very good morning to all of you. On behalf of the Center for Research, Matri College, it's my proud privilege to welcome our esteemed speaker, Professor Richard Davidson, our chairperson for the session, Professor Vivek Suneja, and dear participants. I also extend my warm welcome to all the participants who have joined through Zoom from all over the country. Before we start with today's proceedings, I would request Professor Davidson, Professor Suneja, Principal Ma'am, and other members of the committee to kindly light the lamp. This would be accompanied by a powerful and ancient invocation from the Upanishads by our students, wherein we pray to the Almighty to lead us from ignorance to knowledge, to dispel the darkness and lead us to light, and to lead us from death to immortality. I now request the dignitaries to please grace the dais. Matri College, established in the year 1967, is a premier women's college named after the Vedic scholar Maitreyi, who chose knowledge over wealth. True to its name, at Matri College, we strive relentlessly towards the holistic growth of all the stakeholders. Implicit in the idea of holistic development is the sense of well-being. It is from this perspective that we focus on issues related to well-being. In this direction, the Sociology Department of Matri College has collaborated with Manodarpan, an initiative of Ministry of Education, Government of India, and conducted a series of talks and workshops. Today, we are fortunate to have with us Professor Richard Davidson, renowned psychologist and psychiatrist, and founder and director of the Center for Healthy Minds, University of Wisconsin-Madison. Professor Davidson received his PhD from the Harvard University in psychology in 1976. Sir's research is broadly focused on the neural basis of emotion and emotional styles and methods to promote human flourishing, including meditation and related contemplative practices. He has published numerous articles and edited 14 books. He is the author of The Emotional Life of Your Brain and also the co-author of Altered Traits, published in 2017. He was named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Times Magazine in 2006. He was elected to the National Academy of Medicine in 2017 and appointed to the governing body of UNESCO's Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development in 2018. In 2014, Professor Davidson founded the non-profit Healthy Minds Innovation, which translates science into tools to cultivate and measure well-being. I request Principal Ma'am to formally welcome Professor Davidson. Aarti. Is she here? No, she's not. Exam. She would not be present here in person, but right now she's writing her exam. So she has sent a small gesture. No, that's so kind. Thank you so much. Chairing the session is Professor Vivek Suneja. Dr. Suneja is Professor of Strategy at the Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi. For over a decade, he taught at various premier universities in Britain, including at the University of Salford, Manchester, and at the Open University of Business School. He has served as a Dean of Planning in the University of Delhi and as Pro-Vice Chancellor of the University of Delhi. Professor Suneja has published several books and papers in the areas of strategy, culture, public policy, and economics. His most recent book, Economic Theory and Policy Amidst Global Discontent, has just been published by Francis and Taylor, UK. Professor Suneja has done consulting and training work for several prominent international and national organizations and firms. He is deeply committed to furthering societal well-being. I request Dr. Anurita Jalan to formally welcome Professor Suneja. I would now request our pillar of strength and our ever supportive principal, Professor Haritama Chopra, to address the gathering.
Thank you so much, Bratati. A very good morning and namaste to all. I can't hear any voice. Yes, a very good morning, because when you speak, this is again one emotion which is being reflected, that how happy you are and how happy you are while sitting here. So once again, I will say a very good morning, and I should hear a louder voice this time. A very good morning and namaste to all. Yes, that should be the spirit. And at the outset, I take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome, a very hearty welcome to the renowned academician, orator, speaker, researcher, Professor Richard Davidson. I request all my dear students to greet him with a great round of applause. I also take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to Professor Suneja. I thank you for accepting our invite and for being with us. And at the same time, I take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to all the delegates, participants who have joined us virtually. They all are connected to us through the Zoom platform, and my dear students who all are sitting here. Many of you might be wondering that why are we sitting here? A few of you were sitting in the class, and I asked them to please come, and without even questioning, you accompanied me and you all are sitting. I know when you were in the class, you were talking about that whether the presentation is ready, has the assignment been submitted? So within your mind, so many questions are there. So you will say that so many things are happening, and at that time, when principal ma'am came and she just asked us to join us in a room, you all accepted that. So you must be wondering, but I must tell you that what the decision of following me, it is not a wrong one, because it is a right bet that you have taken, and this 1 hour would take you to another height. Maybe you would be experiencing something which you had never thought of doing so. And because when we are talking about, I hope many of you must be knowing that there would be a session where Professor Richard sir, he would be talking about that well-being is a skill. Many of you might be thinking that skill is something that we say that if we do something with expertise, we do something very well, we do have the practice, that is a skill. If we can do something with precision, that is a skill. Then how can well-being be a skill? And this is a question which would be answered, though I can give you the glimpses of the same, but I think that I should hold myself at this moment. And when we would be interacting during the interactive session, I would also take this opportunity to speak with you, to interact with you. And let me share one important thing, that Professor Richard, he has been visiting India many times. He has been invited as a speaker at the university forum many times, but this is for the first time that he is visiting any of the colleges, undergraduate colleges of University of Delhi. So Maitreyi College has got the opportunity. We have again become first in, because I hope you must be knowing that many times I say that we are pioneer in doing these things. So maybe it has become a preface which is always attached. So this is to another achievement that we got the opportunity to host him for the first time. And another, why we are hosting him, it is a jackpot for us, because though I just spoke with him in this regard also, and he clarified that for academic institutions, it is always done in this manner. But when I was exploring, I was surfing through internet, and I got to know that whenever sir is invited as a speaker at any of the forums, because life, when we talk about well-being, it is not only confined within the institution or at home. So whether it is at the corporate level, because it is observed that if you are well, you work well. So well-being is always, we'll say that it is the focus of any of the organization. And he is always invited, and whenever he visits those companies, because naturally they are minting money, and his company can also take the charges, and his cost, his fee is $50,000. Right. And today he is with us. He would be spending his precious 1 hour with us, wherein he would be interacting. So this is the golden opportunity for you all to interact and clarify whatever question comes into your mind. You speak and you ask. And let me tell you, the best question would be awarded also. So there is a competition amongst you all, that who bags that prize. So I think I won't take any longer, and I can speak with you at length whenever I wish to. But today is the time when this podium, this platform should be handed over to Professor Richards. So I once again extend a very warm welcome and thank you for accepting our invite. Thank you, sir. Sir, please, stage is yours now.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your very enthusiastic words. I would now request Professor Suneja to carry forward the session.
I don't charge $50,000. Nobody will pay me. So over to you, sir.
No, keep the lights on.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm very honored to be with you all today. And let me clarify that I don't take a penny of those funds myself. It all goes to support the research. And I'm here completely free. I happen to be in Delhi for a meeting of the Mahatma Gandhi Institute, for which I serve on the governing board. So it's really a pleasure for me to be here today and to share some of the insights that we have gleaned over the years of our research. And it's really captured in the title of this presentation, which is that well-being is best regarded as a skill. Please leave the lights just as they are. It's just fine. Thank you. So well-being is best regarded as a skill, and that means that it's a skill that is similar to any other skill. We all know that if you want to learn to play a musical instrument, you have to practice. And it is through practice that you will get better. We can leave the lights just as they are. No, it's good. Just perfect. Yeah, thank you. So this is really a very important insight because most people don't think of well-being as a skill. And yet our research and the research of other scientists show that if we practice the core components of well-being, which I'll illustrate in a few minutes, we can actually express well-being in a stronger and more robust way. So this is a conclusion that we've been led to, and it really comes from a fundamental insight of modern neuroscience. And that is there are two fundamentally different kinds of learning. One kind of learning we call declarative learning, which is learning about things. It's conceptual. So if we learn, for example, the value of kindness or the value of honesty, that's very important, but we all, I think, recognize intuitively that that won't be sufficient to be a kind or an honest person. In order to be a kind or an honest person, we need to have a second form of learning that we call procedural learning. Procedural learning is embodied, it is skill-based, it is acquired through practice, and it is represented in brain systems that are completely different from declarative learning. So learning about the value of kindness and learning to be kind are both important, but they're totally different. And they use completely different brain systems. And in order to promote kindness in the world, we need both. So this is something really fundamental. So I'm going to just spend the next period of this presentation giving you a taste for what this work is about. Normally I move around when I talk, but I've been told I have to stay in one place because it's being recorded for Zoom and there are many other people watching. So I am sort of artificially constrained to this space and will do my best to stay put. This slide is a picture that was taken in 2001 in our laboratory. I'm sure all of you recognize His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He has visited us in our laboratory on many occasions, and this was taken in 2001, and it was on the occasion where we were first demonstrating to His Holiness how we can use tools of modern neuroscience to learn about how the brain is related to our mental activity. And what we're showing him here is using magnetic resonance imaging, a certain brain imaging technology, to measure the function of the brain. And so in this little demonstration that we did for His Holiness, we actually had a person imagining that they were moving their fingers, and we saw areas in the brain activated that were associated with movement, even though the person wasn't actually moving, just purely on the basis of mental activity. And this was the first time that His Holiness appreciated that we can actually measure activity occurring in the brain that was associated with the mind. A very important demonstration. So I want to now move into a discussion of well-being, and I won't spend much time on the fact that this is urgent. There is a crisis in well-being on the planet today, and it has devastating impacts that range from decisions that have been made that led to the climate crisis that we're now in, to loneliness and suicide, depression on the other hand. According to the World Health Organization, depression today is the leading cause of morbidity worldwide. And associated with this, there are really horrific consequences that are impairing hundreds of millions of people's lives on the planet today. And so the situation we know has gotten worse during COVID, and we are seeing throughout many different parts of the world today a mental health pandemic that is comparable to the viral pandemic that we all have lived through. And I want to just give you one little data point to underscore the fact that well-being is not simply a subjective state of our mind, but well-being actually is cellular. Well-being gets under the skin and matters. So here is a study that was published just a few years ago in 151 nations, looking at the average well-being of the nation and its relation to life expectancy. Life expectancy is on the vertical or y-axis, and on the x-axis is a measure of well-being in the country. And you can see that countries that have populations that show higher levels of well-being actually live longer. So this is an important fact that underscores that well-being is more than a subjective state, but well-being actually impacts our biology in ways that are consequential for our physical health. According to the World Health Organization, the definition of health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And if we look at the World Health Organization's definition of mental health, it's a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Now, when I was a student, I was taught to look at people and to try to figure out what's wrong with them. And it took a lot of unlearning, because now what I do is I look at people and I try to figure out what's right about them rather than what's wrong about them. It's a complete shift of orientation. And it's my strong conviction, based on all the scientific evidence, that this approach is, in fact, what is needed today to help address the crisis of well-being that we experience throughout the world. So things are pretty bad with respect to well-being and all of the associated crises that are happening on our planet today. And in the United States, Martin Luther King, who you see here, gave a very famous speech in the 1960s. And this was a speech about race relations in the US. And at that time, just as we see today as well, things were pretty terrible. And yet the title of Martin Luther King's talk was not "I Have a Nightmare," but the title is "I Have a Dream." And having a dream about a different way of being, where kindness and compassion are prominent in our behavioral repertoire, is really an important part of the solution. Humans are born to be kind. Humans are born to flourish. And this may seem surprising to some of you, but this statement that I'm making is one that comes from hard scientific evidence. When human beings come into the world very early in life, they show a strong propensity for kind and warm-hearted interactions. And in fact, in research that has been published in some of the best journals in the world, we see that if we expose a 6-month-old baby to a scenario of puppets who are playing together with kindness and joy and cooperation and altruism, compared to puppets that are playing together who are selfish and aggressive, which of those interactions do you think a 6-month-old baby would prefer? How many of you might guess which they would prefer? Would they prefer the kind interaction, or would they prefer the selfish interaction? And what percentage of 6-month-old babies do you think would show this preference? 100%. You're absolutely correct. So in hard-nosed research, this was not a bias of like 55% to 45%. Literally 100% of 6-month-old babies who have been tested in these kinds of scenarios show this preference. This is the kind of evidence that we have that humans are born to be kind. And kindness is a quality very much like language. Every human being comes into the world with a capacity for language. But in order for that capacity to be expressed, it needs to be nurtured. And nurturing kindness is really essential in enabling kindness to flourish. So I want to now introduce a framework for understanding well-being as a skill. And one of the important aspects of this framework is stated on this slide. The very same mechanisms that encode suffering, including neuroplasticity and epigenetics, can be harnessed for the good. So let me unpack this. Neuroplasticity refers to the fact that the brain is the organ that is built to change in response to experience and in response to training. And when we engage in exercises to cultivate qualities like mindfulness and kindness, it turns out our brains change. And the changes in our brain support the enduring expression of these qualities. Epigenetics is the science of how our genes are regulated. Each of us comes into the world with a sequence of chemicals, of base pairs that constitute our DNA. And for the most part, for most of us, under normal circumstances, that will not change over the course of one's life. But what will change is the extent to which any gene is turned on or turned off. You can think of genes having little volume controls that range from low to high. And the extent to which a gene is expressed or turned on is very much influenced by our environment, by our social relationships, by our emotional demeanor. And we know that exposure to adversity, exposure to trauma affects our neuroplasticity and affects our epigenetics. And similarly, we can impact our neuroplasticity and our epigenetics by cultivating well-being, cultivating healthy habits of mind. So let's be more specific here. What contributes to resilience and flourishing? And what are the key pillars of well-being that exhibit plasticity that can be changed through training? And we have published this paper that I'm illustrating here that lays out a framework for understanding the plasticity of well-being, how well-being can actually be trained. And what does this framework consist of? There are 4 key pillars. The first pillar is awareness. Awareness includes mindfulness. It includes our capacity to regulate our attention. And it also includes a capacity for self-awareness. The second pillar is connection. And this is about the qualities that are important for healthy social relationships. Qualities like appreciation and kindness and compassion. The third pillar we call insight. Insight is about a deep, curiosity-driven understanding of how our beliefs and our expectations, particularly of ourselves, shape our experience of the world. And we know that there are some people who have very negative beliefs about themselves, very negative expectations. They have what we might call low self-esteem. And we know that that is a prescription for depression. And an important element of well-being is not so much changing these beliefs and changing these expectations, at least not initially, but it's changing our relationship to these beliefs and expectations so that we can see them. We can recognize that we have them and we can get some distance from them. We can see that they're simply thoughts. And by observing them in this way, we can loosen the grip that they have in hijacking our mind and creating suffering. So this is really important. And finally, The last pillar of well-being is purpose. And purpose here is about clarifying our sense of direction in life and clarifying our values. And it's not so much about finding something more purposeful to do with our lives, but how can we derive meaning and purpose in that which we are already doing, including in the pedestrian activities of our daily life? Can cleaning your apartment, your house, be associated with your sense of purpose? And of course it can be. It simply requires a shift of mindset so that eventually literally everything can be included within your sense of purpose. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to just say a little bit more about some of these key pillars of well-being and give you a taste of some research that supports the plasticity of these four key pillars. So the first is awareness. The person who I'm showing you here is a very famous figure in the history of American psychology, and this is William James. And William James wrote a famous book that was published in 1890 called The Principles of Psychology. And in this book, he has a whole chapter on attention. And he says something really important in this chapter on attention, and I'd like to read it to you. He said, the faculty of voluntarily bringing back a wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. No one is compos sui if he have it not. An education which should improve this faculty would be the education par excellence. But it is easier to define this ideal than to give practical directions for bringing it about. Now, I think if William James had more contact with contemplative traditions from India and from other parts of Asia, he would have seen that these contemplative practices offer a strategy for educating attention. And this is something that modern scientific research has indeed confirmed. So this is a picture of a Tibetan Lama who is being studied in our laboratory. His name is Mingyur Rinpoche. He actually has a monastery here in Bodh Gaya, India. He is a teacher of meditation throughout the world. And he's been to our laboratory on many occasions. We've studied his brain intensively. And we started our work on meditation, studying practitioners like him to see if we could see any differences in their brains compared to the brains of age and gender matched control participants who have not spent all this time meditating. When we first tested Mingyur Rinpoche, he had approximately 62,000 hours of formal meditation practice in his life. And at the time we first tested him, he was around, somewhere around 31 years of age. Quite a lot of practice. And we reasoned that if his brain didn't look different than an average 31-year-old who never meditated, then we wouldn't be able to see any real differences in the brains of more novice practitioners. But sure enough, we did see really major differences in systems in the brain and in processes in the brain that in fact have a lot to do with awareness. And so this is one slide from the first paper that we published on the brains of these long-term meditation practitioners, illustrating a change in brain electrical activity. And this is a kind of brain electrical activity that is associated with the capacity for regulating attention and also a general marker of plasticity. It's called gamma oscillations. And we saw these gamma oscillations in a very pronounced way in these long-term practitioners. And this was one of the first cues that there was really something important here that was occurring in the brains of these meditators when they were engaged in this practice. Okay, I want to say a couple of things about connection. I'm not sure how much time do I have left. No, don't say that. I also want to have questions and answers. 5 minutes. Okay, so I'll tell you a little bit about, actually, I'm going to skip to insight. I'll tell you a little bit about insight. One of the keys of insight is, we think, promoting resilience. And let me give you an example of a kind of laboratory study that we've done that we think really captures how the practices that we're talking about can help in promoting resilience. So we did an experiment where we took these long-term meditation practitioners and brought them into the laboratory, and we evaluated resilience in response to physical pain. Now, all of us have experienced physical pain. So this is something that is common, or at least relatively common. Every human being has had some experience with physical pain, and we can induce pain safely in the laboratory by using heat. And it's real heat and it's very intense, but we can deliver it safely. So it really feels like your skin is burning, but we can do it safely. So what we did in this experiment is something very simple. We gave everyone an experience of this pain caused by heat. We then brought them into the scanner where we could measure their brain, and we told them that they're going to hear a tone, a brief tone like beep. And whenever they heard that, 10 seconds later, they were going to get zapped with this pain. That was the whole experiment. And we brought meditators and non-meditators into the laboratory. So let me show you what we found. And let me just also mention one other thing. We know exactly where in the brain pain, physical pain, is represented. So we can precisely examine the relevant networks in the brain that are associated with this kind of physical pain. So let me show you what happens first with the non-meditators. So we bring the non-meditators into the scanner, and they hear the tone. And then once they hear the tone, their brain immediately begins to respond. There's no physical pain. They just heard beep. That's all that happened. And their brain is responding as if they've been subjected to intense physical pain. Then the pain comes on and the brain continues to respond, and they have a very slow recovery. Now let's see what happens with these long-term meditators. They come into the lab, they hear beep, nothing whatsoever. There's absolutely no significant activation in any of the brain regions associated with pain, zero. Then when the actual painful heat comes on, they show a very big response. But then as soon as it goes off, they rapidly recover. This is the neural signature of resilience. The capacity to rapidly recover following a stressful challenge. And so we can measure that directly. So now I'm just going to skip to the end here, and I want to just show you one other thing, and then we'll end. We've developed a program to cultivate well-being called the Healthy Minds Program, and we have put it into the form of a mobile app that is freely available throughout the world. You can download it here in India, wherever you get apps. And this is just a few screenshots from the program. I would encourage any of you who are interested in training your own well-being to please try this. It's entirely free. And the reason that I sometimes, for organizations that can afford it, ask for money for my talks is so we can release this app free to the world. So it is completely freely available. So please take a look, and if it's of benefit, tell all your friends about it. And we've done several randomized controlled trials. These are kind of the gold standard of clinical research. And we've shown that it can produce tremendous benefit and reduce levels of distress. So I want to end by underscoring the fact that cultivating our well-being is really an urgent public health need. And I want to suggest to you that you can nourish your mind through these simple practices, and through that we can really change the world. And let me end with a quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who said, "The systematic training of the mind, the cultivation of happiness, the genuine inner transformation by deliberately selecting and focusing on positive mental states and challenging negative mental states is possible because of the very structure and function of the brain. But the wiring in our brains is not static, is not irrevocably fixed. Our brains are also adaptable." So thank you very much. You can learn more about our work by going to these websites. Thank you. I'm just going to get some water.
So I think all of us would agree, and extremely wise. And you can see a compassionate talk. I mean, you can see it in the person, can't you? Wisdom and compassion. Let's have questions.
Thank you.
Anybody, feel free. Yeah, come on.
Sorry, say again, I can't.
Can we have the mic?
Yeah, take a mic. Otherwise, shout out loud. Show you have a.
Hello, sir. My name is Parak, and I wanted to ask you that what is the difference in the approaches when you see a person with its bad and with those with its goods?
With,
No, it's resounding. Leave the mic, say that again.
I can't understand.
What are you trying to ask?
I'm trying to ask that what is the difference when you see a person with its bad things and those with its goods?
What?
bad attributes, bad
Bad behaviors and
behavior.
with those persons with its goods. What is the difference between those approaches?
Okay, so the question is, what is the difference between a person with bad attributes and a person with good attributes? Is it?
No. What is the difference when you see the person?
Person who's in your perception bad versus good. What in your perception?
Oh, in your perception.
Yes.
How would you be interacting with them?
Yeah, you mean if when you perceive a person as bad versus perceive them, is that? Yeah. Okay. So first, thank you for that question. We all have filters, if you will, that we see the world through. This is how the mind and the brain work. So our experience of reality, of what's out there, is actually not exactly what's out there, but it's really constructed based on our upbringing, our experiences, our training. All of that influences how we perceive other people. And sometimes we perceive, and sometimes a person is likely to see others and look at their faults, look at their negative qualities, and other people may tune into their positive qualities. And this is something really important, and it teaches us that we can actually change how we perceive the world by first recognizing that we see the world through these filters. And then once we have that recognition, we can begin to loosen the grip that those filters have. And over time, step by step, we can change how we perceive. So this is something really important, and it indicates that there's more flexibility in how we perceive than we might otherwise first believe. Did that answer your question? Okay, thank you.
Good, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Can you shout out loud? Go on, shout out loud. We can hear you. You can hear me? Yes, come on. All the very power. Go on.
So is it practice that really helps you to focus? I think is what she's asking.
So the
Better you come here on the
That's
stage
okay.
and
No, what she's asking is, do gamma waves help in concentration?
yeah. So first, every one of you has gamma oscillations. Everybody has this. It's a normal human attribute. It's just that we differ in how prevalent those gamma oscillations are. And we can learn to enhance those gamma oscillations. And it turns out that the ability to focus our attention is correlated with these gamma oscillations. So that for people who are better able to focus their attention, that is associated with a greater prevalence of gamma oscillations. There's a little bit of research that shows that if you can induce gamma oscillations through a certain kind of neurostimulation, you can indeed help a person to focus better as well. What was that?
So apparently on YouTube and social media, they have sounds actually.
Ah, yeah,
not
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And they claim
Yeah.
that you can listen to that.
Yeah.
Also. So that's
Yeah. Yes, so I'm familiar with that, and for the most part, that's bogus. Yeah, don't believe it.
Good morning. Good morning, sir. I'm Preena Verma, and I'm pursuing sociology honors in this very institution. So, well-being is a part of the Indian civilization as we know it. Yoga and meditation has been an ancient practice in India. And you, from the very beginning of your speech, you emphasized on the fact of kindness. I was hearing it very carefully. And you said that kindness is a very important value that everyone should have. But as a civilization, our experience with kindness is not very good, to be frank. There was Ikhtiyar Khilji who burned our entire Nalanda civilization, even when we treated him and we cured his illness. But in return, he burned the ancient knowledge that we had of Vedas and all the other ancient literature that we have. Now we don't have it. So what is the importance of this kindness, which is not beneficial to us, and it is actually backfiring and not giving back to us in any way? What is the significance of it?
Yeah, first, thank you for that. I'm not sure I fully understood everything, but let me try to respond to that. The evidence shows that when a human being comes into the world, he or she expresses a very strong preference for cooperative, kind, warm-hearted interactions. The fact that when we develop as adults, we can become aggressive, angry, cruel, engage in destructive behavior means that we're learning those attributes through our socialization, through our culture, but they are not consistent with the basic nature of our mind. The basic nature of our mind is one of kindness. And so this underscores, in my view, the importance of incorporating in our educational systems, particularly from very early on in life, practices to cultivate and nurture kindness and to help children to retain and to enhance this inborn quality that they come into the world with. And we see, as you're pointing out, the devastating consequences of not doing that. And so this is why we consider the cultivation of well-being to be an urgent public health need for exactly those reasons.
An eye for the eye, an eye for an eye, which the whole world like. Yes. We had some questions.
I would just ask a question because there are some people who have joined us through Zoom also. So I would just ask one question. Somebody's asked that is positive neuroplasticity increase one's lives with spiritual analysis and positive EQ? Please elaborate. Joseph Johns Fernandez has asked this.
Repeat that one.
Is positive neuroplasticity increase one's life with spiritual analysis?
Will the spiritual quotient go up?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question. Certainly, this is an area of science that touches on spirituality, and we think of spirituality as a basic capacity of the human mind. Humans have the capacity to experience spiritual experiences, to have spiritual experiences, and the qualities that are nurtured through well-being, we think can enhance the likelihood that a person will connect with the spiritual dimension of his or her life. And so in that sense, I think that I would say yes, that engaging in these kinds of strategies will enhance the spiritual capacities of a person by essentially enabling them to recognize or to tap into inherent qualities that every human being has access to, but many human beings never get to experience because we have never paid sufficient attention to those aspects of ourselves.
Right. And there's another question from Neera Pant. This question is specifically about the app that you have been talking about. She asks that, Professor Davidson, I'm a regular user of the Healthy Minds app. It is extremely helpful and I do encourage my students to use it. I just have one question related to the app. Can we use any order of meditations or we need to follow the order?
Great question. First, thank you for the question and thank you for trying out the app. I'm happy it's been helpful. The question about order is a really interesting one that we're actually exploring actively in current scientific research. In the contemplative texts, there is a suggested order, which is the order that we have prescribed in the app. However, it's not necessary that you follow that order. And if you experience a different order as being more helpful, you should do that order. And one of the questions that we're investigating now in our scientific research is whether we can predict which order might be best for which kind of person based on the characteristics of that person that we can assess before they start the training. So it's a wonderful question.
One final question. Okay, there's so many. Can we club them? Just ask and then perhaps we take it together. Yeah, ask a question and then we'll take it together. Go on.
So Sai mentioned that our minds are adaptable. But why everyone is different? Why they are unique? Hello, sir. I am Sadhvi, and my question is that the Dalai Lama mentioned that our minds are adaptable. But why everyone is unique and different? Like, it's a contrast for me. So how would you explain this?
Why is everybody unique? Why is it different? Let's take the question together and now we'll go. Yeah, okay.
Good morning, sir. I am Khushi. Good morning, sir. I am Khushi. And my question is that, how does having a purpose contributes to our overall well-being? Means, does it related to the higher goals we set up, or does it related to the little goals we set for ourselves as a daily?
Yeah, so what is purpose? What's the next part?
How means the purpose, how does the purpose related to our overall well-being? Does it the higher purpose that we set for ourselves or the little goals we set on a daily basis?
Your name is Khushi, which means happiness, right?
Yes.
That's right. So uniqueness, purpose. What's the next? Okay, all right, go on.
Good morning, sir. My name is Astha. So when we adapt a new habit or we try to leave behind the bad one, there are a lot of difficulties that come in our way. How to effectively overcome those difficulties?
If you want to change a habit, it's really difficult to change a habit. So how do you manage that? 3 questions. Yeah. All right. Okay. Good. One set. Uniqueness, purpose, and then habit. Purpose.
Yes. So uniqueness. The Dalai Lama frequently says that every human being is basically the same. We all have the same wish to be happy and to be free of suffering. That is true. And yet it is also true that human beings are unique. The unique aspects of being human say something about how best we can approach the cultivation of happiness or well-being. But every person wants to be happy. That's not something that just a few people want. That's something that's universal. So there are some things that are universal and other things that are unique. And the things that are unique really are more about the tactics of how we can best cultivate well-being, not whether well-being is best for everyone. It is best for everyone. So the second question was about purpose. And purpose is really about finding values and a direction in life that goes beyond oneself. And psychologists have called this self-transcendent purpose, where you might, for example, why are all of you in college? If you ask yourself that question, why am I going to school? Why am I engaged in the studies that you're engaged with? And if you ask yourself that question, and then ask yourself that question again and again and again, one of the things that I think most people would find is that you eventually get to a place where I'm interested in going to college so that I can get a good job. Well, why are you interested in getting a good job? You're interested in getting a good job to make a decent living. Well, why are you interested in making a decent living? Well, I want to help to support my family. That's a self-transcendent purpose. It's beyond yourself. It's beyond doing something only for yourself. And that is something that is fundamental to well-being. There are thousands of research studies showing that when we focus on the well-being of others, it actually is the best strategy to nurture our own well-being.
The third was changing habits.
Yeah, changing habits. So this is a very challenging issue, and it's very difficult to change habits, very difficult. And all of you, I'm sure, have had experience where you know that something is, quote, good for you, but it's very difficult for you to do that on a regular basis. Well, let me remind you all of one thing. I bet that 100% of the people in this audience brush your teeth every day. How many of you brush your teeth every day? Okay. When human beings first evolved on this planet, nobody was brushing their teeth. No one. And this is not part of our genome. This is something that we've all figured out how to do. And we do this because it's important for our personal physical hygiene. What we're talking about is something important for our personal mental hygiene. And how many of you believe that your mind and your heart are even more important than your teeth? Okay. So science shows that if you take even as short a time as you take each day brushing your teeth, nourishing your mind and your heart, this world would be a different place. And so think about that, and think about that each day, and see if you can pair an activity that you do every single day, and it could even be brushing your teeth. But any activity that you do every single day, pair that with a practice to nourish your mind. And you don't have to do formal meditation. You can do this while you're brushing your teeth, or while you're commuting, while you're walking, while you're doing your laundry. Research shows that engaging in this kind of mental exercise while you're doing these other activities of daily living can be just as beneficial. And if you try our app, the Healthy Minds Program app, there are active practices on the app that allow you to do this kind of mental training while you're doing other things like walking. So you don't actually have to take any extra time out of your day. And you can do it for as short as 5 minutes a day. And that amount of time, if you do that every day, is sufficient to actually begin to produce beneficial change. So that's how we start changing a habit, doing it modestly, step by step, and pairing it with another activity of daily living.
So shall we take one final set of 3 questions?
Sure.
Is that okay? So, all right, go on.
You
Yes,
also
ma'am.
asked some very good questions.
Okay, all right, go on.
So my name is Shreya and I'm pursuing sociology minor here in this college. Throughout the talk, sir, you have been really emphasizing on the importance of meditating daily on a regular basis. I've actually read so many articles about this is what you should be doing while meditating and this is what you should be doing. But so I wanted to hear it from a professional, experienced professional. Are we supposed to say like self-affirmations or concentrate on a particular object? What exactly are we supposed to do?
Self-affirmation or constant. Okay. Yeah, shall we take this?
Yeah,
another
take it
two?
from here.
Yeah.
My name is Pasha Singh, and I was asked that in the slide there was a quote, nourish our mind, change our world. So according to you, what do you think adds meaning to life? Change our world in which we live or renovate the world in which we live?
Change the word.
Or innovate.
Change the world completely or innovate the world in which we live?
Oh,
What do you think?
change,
adds meaning to life?
change your world or change the whole world in a sense. Okay. What else? Any other questions we can start? Yes. Yes, ma'am. Go on. I don't want people not sleeping at night to ask questions. Burning Christmas. Good.
So myself, Amisha, and I'm from English Honors. And my question is, how can we capitalize our anger for a good cause? And the another one is, how can we bring the proper balance between the heart and brain?
A heart and
Brain. Balance between heart and brain. Capitalize on anger is the word she
For a
used.
good cause.
That's unfair. Two questions.
In fact, there's another question regarding anger, which
Yeah.
is from the Zoom. They have also asked that, I mean, is it better to control your anger or, if we just express your anger? Because if we control, doesn't it harm our entire body and entire system?
Okay. So let's
Let's do it. You began by how do we meditate?
So we can sit also by add meaning to life, change our world or renovate our
Yeah, change our world, change the whole world, and do questions on anger, and finally on heart and balance.
Okay. So your question about meditation. I often say that the best form of meditation that you can possibly do is whatever the form of meditation is that you actually do. The importance is doing it regularly. So whatever people, as going back to your question about uniqueness, some people prefer certain kinds of practices for certain reasons, which is okay. The most important thing is that you do something and stick with it. So you can learn about many different forms of meditation. If you download our app, you can try it. There are hundreds of different kinds of meditations. And we offer them really in part as a way for people to find what works best for them and then stick with it. So your question about innovation and changing the world, not exactly sure what you're referring to, but in our view, we are seeing a crisis of self-centeredness and greed in this world. Many of the problems in this world stem from the same root cause, from self-centeredness, from excessive greed. And by challenging those qualities, by working at the root of those, the sources of those problems, we can produce really beneficial change. In order for for sustained change to occur in this world, we need many different things. But one of the things that we absolutely necessarily need is for there to be a shift from this kind of self-centeredness to caring for others. And that comes about through nurturing kindness and compassion. So the third set of questions was about anger. There are many things to say about anger. I just, in October, was with His Holiness the Dalai Lama for several weeks up in Dharamsala. And His Holiness repeated what I've heard him say on many occasions, and that is that anger is, for the most part, a destructive emotion. And certainly keeping anger in, suppressing it, we know from hard-nosed research can lead to all kinds of problems, including physical illnesses. Anger also is part of our natural repertoire. We come into the world with the capacity for anger, and anger arises in situations where our goals are thwarted, where we encounter an obstacle. And we often get angry, and we often, at least in certain cultures, want to destroy the obstacle that is impeding our goal. So anger has a function. The function of anger is to overcome the obstacle. And there's a certain kind of energy associated with anger that we might be able to harness for the good, but it requires practice and training. And also, one of the things about anger is that it often lingers. It lingers beyond the point where it might be useful, and that's when it really can become destructive. So in general, this is certainly true for anger, but it's also true for most other emotions, that learning to regulate our emotions so that we can have the emotion available when it is useful, but then have it dissipate rapidly when it's no longer appropriate, is something that is particularly conducive to well-being.
Kindness towards others. How do you get a person who's or a community victim of genocide or violence or riots get to be kind to others? How does one bring it to them? These are the questions that we are having. These are issues of our everyday life, which is very important.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a serious and critical issue. And I think the answer to that is working with our young children. We know that before the age of 3 years, toddlers, young children, they are not racist. They do not make distinctions between in-group and out-group. They do not make decisions based on the color of a person's skin at all. So that's how we come into the world. So we need to work with young children to preserve and sustain the natural way of the mind, which is the way of kindness and the way of compassion. And unfortunately, we have not incorporated those strategies into our educational systems, but this is absolutely essential if we're going to have a sustainable future for humanity.
3-year-old children, the socialization, I mean, they can be, these habits can be incorporated, they could be trained. But these are communities which are suffering, say, for example, riot victims, victims of, say, genocide, Holocaust, let's say. How does one, how does one teach their children, because they are within the community? Is the community ready? Does the community teach them that? Because I I'm very familiar with a whole lot of narratives where you relive these violent occurrences to
Yeah.
remember them.
Yeah, so let me just say that I appreciate the question, and we've been deeply interested in and committed to that as well. And we just published a recent study, for example, with teenage girls from the country of Colombia who've been subjected to horrific abuse, who've experienced tremendous trauma and violence in their lives. And we were able to demonstrate that with the right kind of program to cultivate well-being that's in that case very intensive, we can really make a difference. And not only can we make a difference in their behavior, but we actually change their gene expression. We can shift their epigenetics. And so there's a lot more plasticity than we often give credit for, but we need to use interventions that are comparable in intensity to the trauma that a person may have experienced. So in the kind of cases, excuse me, that you're describing, we need very intensive programs. But those intensive programs work. They show real benefit. Yes, yeah.
Can I just ask one related last question, please? May I?
Yes.
So just connecting to what she said on a wider platform, how are we going to be dealing with, let's say, girl children who go back to a abusive situation, or they come from a socio-cultural background, and we try and do practices with them in school, but they go back to that situation, maybe domestic violence or whatever, every single day? You think it'll help there also?
Yeah, so you know, you're all raising really important questions, and you know, there are no magic bullets, so to speak. There's no panacea, and I think it's important for us not to be naive about the difficulties and the challenges that we face. However, having said all that, I think that the scientific evidence clearly shows that these kinds of approaches can make a real difference. We have seen that even in some schools where violence is prevalent, they're in situations where there's a lot of poverty and violence and tremendous difficulty. When we've worked with the whole school, we've actually seen the entire school system change. We've seen the neighborhood change. And again, it's gradual, it's step by step, but over a few years, we have seen in several different parts of the world, those kinds of changes occurring. And let me just end this by saying that if nothing else, we have a moral obligation to try.
I think we're well past the $50,000. I'd like to just say a few words in gratitude and thanks, and maybe sum up for ourselves what we've heard today. The number of questions that have been asked demonstrates we're interested in this, right? These are not questions just for first prize. You could see that, not to impress us. They were genuine questions. How many of you want to be happy? That's the point that Laima asked, and David was asking, Richard was asking. How many of you want to be happy? Can you raise your hands? All right. How many of you at this point are genuinely, deeply happy? Raise. Okay, good. So there are others whose hands are not going up, and maybe there are also levels of happiness, who knows, right? Perhaps we can strike a bargain. If everybody here uses or tries the app, which is for free completely, maybe we can urge Richard to come some later point. Is that a good bargain? We'd love to have him again. kind of things he said in his talk, combining science, hard scientific evidence with happiness. Yes. So you saw the graph on the meditators, how quickly they recovered. First, anticipation of pain did not. Anxiety, is that a major problem in modern society? Anxiety, event hasn't happened. It may happen. Anything can happen for God. I mean, yes. So we're constantly anxious. Far before the event may never come. Yes, there may not be a buzzer at all, but in our head, there are all kinds of pain buzzers as a result of our childhood traumas and conditioning. So we're anticipating something will happen. Another COVID. Yeah, failing in class. Who knows? I mean, bullying. It may not happen. Constant buzzers, anxiety. And I think that graph showed that if you're mindful, if you're in the present moment, first, you don't get anxious until the event. You may plan for it. You may take action to avoid it, but you don't necessarily get anxious. And then you quickly recover, which is resilience. Yes? So hard scientific evidence. If there was more time, he would talk to you more about the 4 pillars. But please remember the 4 pillars, right? What were the 4 pillars? First, awareness. Number 2, connection. Third, insight. Fourth, purpose. Brilliant. They've been hearing you. Huh? Wonderful. My students don't hear me at all. So this is absolutely brilliant. Awareness. And awareness is different from thinking. Most of the time, we're lost in our thoughts. That's not awareness. To be aware of our thoughts is awareness. Yes, aware of our emotions. And as Richard was saying, that gives you a little distance. So you don't identify with your emotions. You don't identify. You don't make a self. In Buddhism, they say we don't have a self, anat. Self is an illusion. Self means our identity, our sense of identity. If you hear his talk on YouTube, insight is about changing our relationship with the narrative of ourselves. We all have a story. I am this. Ek Ram Katha hai. This is a story about ourselves. Yeah? I am this. Somebody asked you, who are you? I am this. I'm born here. I'm introvert. I'm extrovert. Well, those are your thoughts. Those are your emotions. They keep changing. And if they keep changing, are they you? Millions of thoughts come in a day. If I asked you, stop thinking for 10 minutes, oh, forget 10 minutes, 50 seconds, can you stop thinking? You can't. If you can't, and they're not in your control, are they your thoughts? Or they just thoughts that come and go to you in your consciousness? So why do you identify yourselves with those thoughts? Yes? You understand? Awareness. Connection. So I must say something. You know, the Buddha, his first sermon, we are in the land of the Buddha, yes. His first sermon, I think you've heard this somewhere, never studied deeply, 4 noble truths. Yes. First truth, there's suffering. He's talking about encoding of suffering, there's suffering. The suffering is a cause, and if you read normal English translations, it says the cause of suffering is craving or desire. So if you end craving or desire, you end suffering. Of course, a lot of you will ask, if there's no desire, how do you live at all? I mean, that's motivation. Yes. If you look at the words themselves in Hindi, for example, suffering is called dukkha. Right? Dukkha is not just physical suffering, it's a sense of lack of ease, dis-ease, lack of ease, not feeling fulfilled, feeling incomplete, right? Feeling a sense of incompleteness. So you're not never fully satisfied. In Urdu, you use the word sukoon. Sukoon nahi hai, right? We are not fully satisfied. That's dukkha and all kinds of. But the word that they use for the root of suffering, in Sanskrit, the word is trishna. So desire, craving, the word in Sanskrit is trishna. English being an Indo-European language, the word thirst comes from trishna. So the cause of suffering is thirst. Thirst is craving. But interestingly, Buddha never taught in Sanskrit. Buddha taught in Pali, Magadhi Prakrit, right? He didn't want intermediaries. He didn't want a priestly class. He was speaking to the people in their own language. The word he used was not Trishna. It was the Sanskrit Pandits which converted into Trishna. The word he used in his sermon was tanha. The cause of dukh or suffering is tanha. Now, the word tanha is an Indo-European word. I think all of you are familiar with it, right? David may not be. Tanhai. What does that mean? We still use it in the Persian context. What is tanhai? Only tanhai. Tanha means loneliness. Not in a positive sense of solitude. That can be wonderful. In meditation, you can positively be with yourself. No. In a sense of alienation, in a sense of isolation, lack of connection. And what are you not connected with? Why are you lonely? Why are you alienated? Because you cut off from your own inner truth. You don't have insight into that thoughts are not you, emotions are not you. They come and go. So you make a story out of them. And then the story can become good or bad. And then you try and impress people with your stories. Yes, you try and impress yourself with your own story. You know, Yuval Noah Harari, I don't know whether you've read his books. He's got famous books called Sapiens, and his third book is 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. He's a great Vipassana meditator. His second last chapter is, life is not a story. It's not a narrative. I am more than my story. My stories can change. Yes, my stories can constantly change. Okay, depending on my education and so on. I am not the tale, the fairy tale I tell you. For sociologists, man is a social being, right? We are not like solitary bears with a larger brain. We're like honeybees or ants with larger brains. The reason we came to dominate the planet, sapiens, was we have larger brains, right? And that can create a lot of trouble, which David did images, right? But if we were only like bears, not social animals, just solitary creatures with larger brains, no good. We can build on knowledge, we can hear what Richard is saying, other people can build on what Richard is saying, we can pass it through generations. So all our cultures, all our scientific knowledge, we can share and build upon. We are a collective. And for that, we need cooperation, for God's sake, not just competition. This business world has this. Even in the business world, you need enormous amounts of cooperation. I'm a management person. Ask me how much cooperation. Within a firm, within an organization, you need cooperation, not competition. One organization can compete with another. Just like one football team, there's a World Cup going on, can compete with another. But within the football team, you cooperate. Within family, you cooperate. And even one family can cooperate with another. So this notion, which comes from Adam Smith and all that, you know, by individual competition and selfishness, and Adam Smith made virtue out of selfishness, that only then there'll be efficiency and competition, and you know, we'll all be on our toes all the time. So unless you've had NAC visit, we are hopeless, and then we can get all A pluses, and then we'll be on our toes all the time. Partially true, but not fully true, right? We need to cooperate. We need to be self-motivated. I think the biggest slide which struck me about Richard was toddlers, and when you show them puppets, and when they cooperate, they choose 100%. Anurita got that right. 100% people, babies, pick those which are cooperating. And therefore, it begs the question, what happens while we get educated? Education, normally we think we come as a blank, and then education can either make us, you know, positive or negative. But no. We come with compassion, with kindness. So if the world is now turning out to be unkind, there's something wrong we're doing. The question is not education, the question therefore is uneducated. I mean, at least the way we're doing it. It's unlearning, because there's something wrong going on in a society. Education is not through just military college. It's in our families, in our socializing processes, the movies we watch, the cultures we have, the general discourse of society. There's something wrong, because if 3-year kids or even younger, I think you mentioned 18 months or what? 6 months, 100% are picking up puppets which are kind to each other. And there is a large proportion of the world now which is not kind. There's something in the growing up process, in the socializing process, the stories that civilizations tell about themselves, not individual stories, collective stories, which is what a culture is. A culture is a collective story, it's a collective myth. Yes, there's something seriously wrong there. Uh, Tanha, the word isolation. We're disconnected from ourselves, a true reality. We believe in the narrative, in myths. Therefore, we also cut off from others. Because if I believe in my story, this story relates to another story. I never talk person to person. My story talks to my imagined story about you. So where is the connection? It's a very superficial connection. I impress you, you impress me with money, with status, with position. Heart to heart, there's no heart to heart talk. For that, you have to go to awareness. So that connection is lost. If that connection is lost to yourself and to others, you're isolated, you alienated. So there is no happiness. When there is no happiness, there'll be thirst for happiness, and you fill up those thirsts with substitutes. Egoic pleasures, power. And you can drink all the salty water of the 7 oceans of the world. It will even make you more thirsty. So pleasures are fine, but if you think cars, yes, and big houses, and big names, and big status, so-called pleasures can satisfy the hunger for true joy, it will never happen. Pleasures can be a bonus, healthy pleasures, wholesome pleasures, but they will never fill up the void unless you're connected to your true source, and you can connect to the true source of others. So I couldn't help it, because when you hear a brilliant lecture, you want to say something. We are so grateful he's here. I must congratulate Maitri College for getting him here, which is so absolutely brilliant. And I think you should all try his app, watch his videos. I've been meditating with him. He doesn't know that. He has guided meditation videos, and I often meditated with him in spirit. You can go to YouTube. It's all free. It's brilliant. Think about what's been said. Lovely questions. Keep up the good work. And I'm going to blackmail him. We're going to get him again whenever it's convenient for him at some point of time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for summarizing Professor Davidson's special lecture and also for your wonderful insights. And before I hand over the mic to Dr. Meena Yadav for the formal vote of thanks, I would just like to share something with the students, because I feel this is a very important part in your life, and just the importance of perseverance. Because we had approached Professor Davidson for our international conference Equinox in the month of April. And at that time, he was not available, but we didn't leave hope. And after almost 20 to 22 mails, I think, to and fro, we finally, one morning I got a mail from Max, who was coordinating the entire thing from his side, that Professor Davidson would be visiting India for a very short duration. And so even I was a bit hesitant because the examinations were going on, but when I spoke to our principal, she, without even a thought, she said, no, you should go ahead with it. And so I think I'm really very thankful to sir for remembering us and getting back to us. And I thank you from the core of my heart. And I would now request Dr. Meena Yadav. Oh, before that, as is the trend, we usually give a token of appreciation to a student for the questions that has been asked in the interactive session. And all the questions were very relevant, but one of them, because maybe it reflected the questions from in many of our heads, that was from Amisha Moria, English honors, about anger. So I would request Amisha to please come here. Sir, could you please? I now request Dr. Meena Yadav to please deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Pratiti. It's an honor for me to deliver a vote of thanks on behalf of Maitri College, University of Delhi. A very special thanks from all of us to our invited speaker, Professor Davidson, for accepting our invitation and to be here with us today. We are really honored to have him. Sir, your thoughts have truly inspired us, and you suggested and emphasized that well-being is more than the subjective state. And humans are born kind, and kindness needs to be nurtured. That is the lesson that we should take forward. His experiments have, they also suggest that neuroplasticity plasticity and epigenetics, they can be harnessed for the good. So, and in addition to that, there are many other things I hope you are taking with you today. So we thank you, sir, for an empowering talk today. And I'm confident that all of us feel energized and refreshed after today's talk. Thank you very much. My sincere thanks to Professor Suneja for chairing, moderating, and concluding the session flawlessly, especially the interactive session where we witnessed some interesting questions from our participants here in the hall and also through the Zoom. I would also like to thank our very supportive and encouraging principal, Professor Haritma Chopra, ma'am, for guiding us in all our endeavors. I thank the girls who beautifully sang the prayer song and started, the event. Also, I'm thankful to my entire team for all the necessary arrangements that made the event smooth and successfully. Thanks are to Dr. Gopi Tripathi, Dr. Anurita, Dr. Pinky, Dr. Pratiti Roy, Dr. Jaspreet, Ms. Devangana, Dr. Parul Yadav, Dr. Tejinder, Dr. Ghazala, Dr. Anita, Dr. Neeraj, Mr. Pawan, Dr. Bijayani, and Dr. Aruna. I also thank the student volunteers who have been running here and there to make all the arrangements on our call, and the office staff for providing the infrastructure and the technical support. Last, but certainly not the least, I would like to thank all the participants, those who are here with us in the hall today, and also those who joined us through our Zoom link from different corners of the country. If time is money, then today, certainly you have spent millions with us. So thank you so much for making this event successful. Have a nice day.
Yes, we'll sit here only so that so that
One with the organizers. Okay. Organizing committee can all come here.
so you can please be seated. We just take one photograph.
So please be seated. We'll just take one photograph.
Students, please be seated. After this, we'll be having a group photograph. So we all would be sitting in the front row, and then we would be capturing this moment. So please be
Committee members.
Thank you.
We need to go and
Sit there.
हमारा उधर ही दिया था Hello, everyone. We have scanned this barcode. Please scan this barcode and fill in the feedback form, everyone.
बंद कर दिया क्या? क्यों? अच्छा वो कर लेंगे, ठीक है, सब जगह लगा हुआ है। वैसे उस स्क्रीन पे दिखा दिया था।